Alex McFarland is a leading Christian apologist. If you're wondering, that doesn't mean he apologizes for the faith. It means he defends Christ's history and shows why you can trust it. To get there, he first explains what historians want.
They want eyewitness testimony. They want multiple testimony. They want early testimony. And the fourth is hostile testimony.
As for eyewitness and early, the Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are by men who either knew Jesus in the flesh or got their facts from eyewitnesses, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, and others. Paul's epistles are written by a man who encountered the resurrected Christ.
We have got the Gospels coming to us from less than 10 years after the cross.
Compare that to the 643 ancient copies of Homer's Iliad, whose authenticity scholars don't question.
But from the time of the writing to the copies we have, more than 500 years. In fact, around 900 years. We've got the Annals of Caesar, which comes to us in several dozen copies. But again, from the earliest copies we have, the time of writing, nearly a millennia, 1,000 years.
Compare that to the main facts about Christ.
The core of Jesus' identity message credentials was in circulation regularly within 8 weeks after the cross.
As for hostile testimony, or at least not pro-Christian, many outside sources wrote of this Jesus.
A worker of wonders, did miracles, claimed to be God, crucified at Passover. The core facts of the gospel, death, deity, and resurrection, just based on ancient Jewish, Greek, and Roman sources that certainly were no friend to the burgeoning church. That's very compelling to historians because it represents objectivity, that those no friend of the movement also corroborate the core facts of what we know about Jesus.
Filmmaker Rick Larson finds proof of Christ and the miraculous world around him in a whole different sphere, scientific evidence.
There are two great events in Christianity. There's the incarnation and there's the execution and resurrection. Those are the two great events. And those two things, God chose to leave hard evidence that we can find today and show that they occurred.
In the Star of Bethlehem documentary, Larson found there really was a light in the heavens that guided the wise men to baby Jesus. It was even shown on coins made at the time. The Christquake shows how Larson's crew found in ground, once covered by the Dead Sea, the geologic ripples of the gigantic earthquake that split rocks at the very hour of Jesus' death.
Gordon, the Gospel of Matthew mentions both the Star of Bethlehem and the earthquake at the cross, and Larson, as he was just saying there, there's scientific evidence for both of them. As for the written record, there are some 30,000 ancient fragments, portions, whole copies of the New Testament, far more than Homer's Iliad or biographies of Caesar. Gordon?
Well, I've got to ask, Paul, why the doubt? Why do you think so many more people accept Homer, accept Socrates, but then doubt that Jesus Christ really lived?
You know, I think what's interesting about this is you can believe those guys, you can see proof of them in history and all that, but I think it doesn't really affect people. But if you believe that Jesus Christ existed, then you have to face, well, is he crazy or was he lying? He's saying he's the Son of God. So maybe you like all his teachings and everything, but there's that core question that he's saying he's the Son of God, and we've got his resurrection to deal with. And then so people have to then say, well, then, if all of that is true, then that proves there's a God, and I have to face that fact, and I have to make a decision. And so therefore, I think that's the thing. People don't necessarily want to have to face that decision. They don't want to necessarily have to give their life to their Lord. So he's been challenged throughout all of these last 2,000 years. And I think as long as there's mankind, there'll always be those challenges.
Yeah, that's true. But he's the one who split BC into AD, so we need to keep that in mind. You've interviewed several famous apologists over the years. Why do they end up becoming such fierce defenders of the faith?
I think because they were such fierce enemies of the faith at the start. We've got guys like Josh McDowell, who was a legal scholar, across the Atlantic to find out. He was basically sent out to find out, to do a paper that would disprove God existed, and he ended up finding so much evidence for him that he became a believer. We got guys like cold case detective J. Warner Wallace, who used his skills as a detective, thinking, I'm going to prove that these things didn't happen, like the resurrection. He became a fierce believer. We've got C.S. Lewis, a man, one of the most brilliant scholars in the world, who didn't want to believe, but found so much evidence that he believed. And even Lee Strobel, journalist, used all his skills as a journalist to investigate and became a fierce believer. So, and even in my own life, I was an atheist right during the Jesus People movement, spent hours and hours in my high school trying to talk young people out of their faith until finally I had to face that question about, hold it here. What is my evidence that he doesn't exist? And I finally ended up searching. And until there was a moment when I was saying, God, you've got to show me, are you real or not? And had an encounter where God himself said, just ask me. And I said, are you real? And he said, I am. And I gave my heart to him because, again, I ran right into the guy. There was no doubt because there he was right in front of me.
Well, Paul, thanks for the insight and thanks for being with us. And for you at home this Easter, realize that you have to make a decision. Is Jesus real? Is he who he says he is? And the same question that he asked his disciples, he'll ask you. Who do you say I am? Who am I to you? Here's a wonderful prayer for you. It's guaranteed to get an answer. This isn't something you say jokingly, but if you do it with all of your heart, if you'll seek, you will find. But here's the prayer. Jesus, if you're real, if you're my Savior, if you really are the Messiah, could you show me? Could you show up for me? And that way, he will, if you pray that with all of your heart. And you won't have to take somebody else's word for it. You'll have your own direct evidence that Jesus is alive today. Hello, I'm Gordon Robertson. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more encouraging videos like this one. Welcome to the 700 Club Interactive family, and God bless you.